Well, get those life vest zipped in clips, strap down those rods, and stow away those tackle bags because we are going fishing. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Bass to Anglers podcast. I'm your host, Keith Nicewanger, and I hope this episode finds you with 5 for 25 in your live well. But if you do have 5 for 25 in your live well, I hope you're in a Camus, because only Camus bass boats have the high-speed pickups that pump fresh water into your live well even when you're flying down the lake. From 2001 through 2008, I did an internet radio talk show that covered professional bass fishing. We talked all about the tours and all the various things that were taking place at that time in the world of tournament bass fishing. I didn't know it at the time, but this internet radio bass fishing talk show that I was doing was apparently actually a podcast. We didn't start calling them podcasts until somewhere around 2009, 2010, somewhere in that area. But anyway, in those days, On the Water with Keith Nicewanger and the accompanying website, BassTourAnglers.com, provided full coverage of all the tours. At the 2003 Bassmaster Classic, Mike Iaconelli was a daily correspondent on our show, and we got to hear his championship process. He would get off the water and he would report to us, and we would put it up on our website and talk about it on our show. And it was quite an amazing thing. At the 2006 Forest Wood Cup, Brent Erler kept a daily journal on our website about how his tournament was going at the Forest Wood Cup on Alabama's Logan Martin, which of course he won. And I was Luke Clausen's media representative in his boat for the final day of his Classic Championship in 2006. We had a good streak of really solid contribution, and it was a good thing. Very exciting times back then. And to go along with it, we were right in the middle of the formation of the Professional Anglers Association, giving anglers a voice in their world. It was kind of like bass fishing's version of free agency. Before the PAA was formed, bass anglers didn't have much of a voice, and they were kind of at the mercy of the organizations. And with the PAA, it was very much like a free agency process. In 2004, Mark Jeffries began his own version of an internet radio talk show. Actually, I believe he was on live on a radio station in Oklahoma. But I remember corresponding with him and talking to him several times in what was to become Bass Talk Live. Today, Bass Talk Live is in its 21st season and is still going as strong as it ever did. And even though Jeffries retired in 2022, he left the show in the very capable hands of BASS Open Pro, Matt Pangrac. Bass Talk Live is a broadcast of our favorite sport. While it is not the actual fishing that we crave, it is analysis. It's scuttlebutt. It is the thing that provides us with all the information that we crave. You think about this. We devour NFL football on Sundays. Absolutely devour it. And you know, we get bonus Mondays and we get some Thursday games, but we devour NFL football on Sundays. And then on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, we listen to talk radio shows where they talk about football. I don't know about you, but BTL is my bass fishing fix. I can't get enough of it. I need it every day, and I consume it the same way I consume all other types of sports talk radio. Camus Boats, from the mind of Earl Bentz. Excellence, tradition, and service, all part of the Camus advantage. On the water perfection. This is your next boat. Build your next boat at CamusBoats.com. Ducket Fishing, pro-driven rods, reels, and baits. The choice of champions. Check out ducketfishing.com to see what everybody's talking about. Ducket Fishing, pro-driven. On our show today, we're going to pull back the curtains a little bit and take a look inside the world that is BTL. Our guest speaks to you nearly every day on his well-known Bass Talk Live broadcast. Besides being a leading content creator in the industry, he also pays his dues each season on the Bassmaster Open Tour, which, by the way, is the toughest fishing tour that we have going. The Opens are by far the toughest. He's also a leader in the world of bass fishing philanthropy, as his work with St. Jude's and other near fishing charities increases each year. Matt Pangrac, thanks for taking some time with us today and being on the Bass Tour Anglers podcast. Welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me on, Keith. I appreciate it.
First of all, I would like to say that I am a huge, giant fan of BTL. It's one of those can't miss things every morning. And I really want to congratulate you on your post Jeffries years. Obviously, what Mark did, getting the program, getting established is good. But I really feel like in the last couple of years, you've put your own thumbprint on it, and it's tremendous.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, Jeffries was doing this. This is we say it's the 21st year of BTL, but I know, I became familiar with you back when you used to host. Do you talk about the brush pile at all on your podcast, which was really, really based on what's going on today, about 20 years ahead of its time. It was kind of like the go-to blog for what was going on kind of behind the scenes with some opinions and some of the stuff that it didn't see. But yeah, Jeffries is way ahead of his time. He started with a local radio show, and then went to the Sirius XM platform that ran with Gary Judici for 4 or 5 years, and then in that 2009 2010 time kind of jumped forward to the Bass Talk Live, which is what it's been since then. But I remember him being on calls with this dude in England, and with the time differential, he would be there 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and he's like, I want to bring in live guests and I want to have instant feedback. And there wasn't StreamYard, there wasn't Zoom at the time or anything, and he spent hundreds of hours trying to get it dialed in. So I was just kind of along as the co-host and just kind of developed it, as it went on for 12 years with Jeffries. And then I haven't really told the story. I don't think he'll be upset. Screw it. He doesn't run it anymore. I do.
That's the way it goes.
So Keith, he walked in one day 3 years ago, and he had his phone open, and it was it was like an account, and he tossed it on the desk, and he looked down, and he said, someone told me that I wouldn't ever make X amount of money in fishing. And he goes, how much does that say? And it said a certain amount. And he goes, I did it. I'm done after this year. It's yours. And I just remember, I get chills thinking, I'm like, holy cow, how am I going to take this over? Because, I just co-hosted it and came in and did a bunch of stuff. So I was pretty nervous taking over BTL, literally thousands and thousands of shows co-hosting, and a lot of opinions on, should I have a co-host? Who would be my co-host? Should I have multiple co-hosts? How would I do the show? Where would I do the show? So it's kind of developed organically over the past 3 years to where I'm comfortable. And I was looking at it, dude, I'm right at around 600 shows solo now. So I really enjoy it. But that whole thing started with Jeffries, and I really learned a lot from him over the years that he was at the helm.
Well, I remember when he was starting this, because he and I spoke a few times. I don't think I ever interviewed him, but we spoke off the air a few times. I was doing an internet radio show. Who the heck knew it was going to be called a podcast?
Yeah.
This was internet radio, and it was on an internet radio station. And about the time I stopped doing it for a while is about the time everybody started calling these things podcasts. And I'm like, that's what I was doing.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it was not that many years ago. It was probably 6, 7 years ago. I knew we were doing it on Bass Zone. We didn't even start the YouTube channel till 2018, 2019, because old school. Everyone's about page views on websites, which ironically, why would you split it up on YouTube? Yeah, impressions, and banner ads and all that. But I remember Jeffrey's talking about how he would put it out on a podcast platform. And that was about when I got my iPhone, and I'm like, what is this podcast thing? And then I remember clicking on the purple eye and being like, oh, it's out here on an MP3. And that's when I realized there were thousands of people that were just listening to it, at work, in the truck, on their way to school. And I mean, now look at it, it's it's probably one of the preeminent ways that a lot of the information in the industry gets disseminated.
Well, I think it may have influenced the last presidential election too.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Podcast, not
Yeah,
not my podcast,
there's a
but
key Joe Rogan interview
yeah,
potentially.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's get to this. So you're just back from the first BASS Open Division II event at Sam Rayburn. I got my thoughts about the whole thing, but let's hear from you. What did you learn? What did you learn from that event?
Yeah, that was a go with the flow event. That was where you really had to embrace the I don't want to use the word luck, but you had to embrace the unknown element of it.
Yeah,
It ended up being a 1 day event.
turkey
It's
shoot.
really hard. Like I'll never criticize a tournament director or an organization for canceling a day due to safety, whether it be weather or not.
Absolutely, I agree.
You know, we've had some really sad things that have happened in the past couple years on the water, and they're making the best decision that they can with the information that they have at hand. Yes, it's inconvenient. It's a bummer that it ended up being a 1 day shootout with a $2,000 entry fee, but Hank had an impossible job there to do. So I'll never argue with canceled days due to safety. It was literally just go out and catch them. I mean, I hadn't fished a BFL since I think 2015 maybe, and it
Yeah.
reminded me a lot of that. Like you go out and you either make it happen or you don't. I kind of liked that element of it. I was excited for it. You know, every fish you don't have a chance to make it up, but at the end of the day, you come in and you're like, man, that's like a quarter of the division that was just done
Yeah.
in 1 day. There was some stuff that with the flighting of the fields, I thought that was odd. You know, like guys in the first flight took out at 7 and then they held the next flight for 10 minutes. I didn't even start fishing till 9, 10 in the morning. So there was a whole half of the field that basically had the lake to themselves for a couple
Yeah,
hours.
I watched your show this morning already,
Yeah,
and
I mean, it is what it is. I think there could have been a better way to do that, but also I think this is the first 1 day open that they've ever had.
yeah,
So you either catch them or you don't, and I like caught them, just not good enough.
well, yeah. I mean, you got five, and you got there. So from a fishing standpoint, what's the lesson? Any lessons?
Uh, the lesson is you just have to. You cannot force things on the water. You have to let them happen organically, and even more so, you know, when you're used to having 16 to 17 hours to make it happen in 8, it's real easy to run around to try to force things to happen. And if you think about it, you know, you watch the best in the business do it. You watch Wheeler fish, you watch Polinick fish, and the cool thing with the GoPros, with the cameramen that are in them, with the live coverage that MLF and BASS and the MPFL has, is these guys that are at the top of their game, they never feel like they're in a rush. They always feel like they're in control over the course of the days. And I think in order to have success, whether it be a 1 day tournament or a 3 day tournament, that's kind of all between the ears, as long as you've done your homework and you're around the fish.
Did you catch your fish doing what you thought you were going to do?
I caught him in the exact same spot that I thought I was going to catch my biggest fish. I made good decisions. I just didn't have an opportunity to big fish. Like that water dropped 11 degrees, and there had been a lot of floaters, a lot of suspended fish that you have to give it enough time to realize it's not going to happen and that those fish aren't there. But I did run around a little bit during the middle of the day. I was smart enough to say, okay, I know there's fish here on this spot, so I went back and just kind of milked it out. Once I realized it wasn't going to be a wide open 20 to 30 pound bag, get the most points that you can, finish as high as you can, and lose the battle but win the war, hopefully.
Yeah. We were speaking with Matt Pangrac, tournament angler, fishing industry influencer, host of BTL. BTL, I got to think that everything that I do, everything that everyone's doing, it's all kind of based upon what you and Jeffrey just started at some point way back in the day. Often copied, never bested. I mean, let's face it, I think every podcaster out there wants to be Matt Pangrac. Take us through a typical day. How in the world do you make all this magic happen? You're the only guy, right?
Yeah, no, it's just me. I've got all of my systems that are here and audio and things, and I mean, it's just like, to me, it's just like any job. So I do this full time. I've done this full time, whether it be with Jeffries or that, since I was 22 years old, 23 years old, and I just turned 40 this past year. So it's kind of something that happens organically. Like when you get into it, like you can look at a plumber, a roofer, an arc, like any, like once you get into it, you understand how it's going. It seems to flow smooth. You know, the booking of the guests, the shows, it just comes naturally. You're around it for so many years. You always, you know how the fishing industry is, Keith. It's not like 6 degrees of separation. It's 1 degree of separation. So if you want to have someone, you know, someone who has that guy's number, you're in an industry where guys make a lot of their living on marketing, on publicity. It's an established show. It's easy to get the guys on who want to come on and talk about it, talk about the fishing, talk about the industry. So, you know, during tournament season, I try to get relevant guests on based on finishes. It doesn't have to necessarily be the winner. Like I've got Terry Scroggins on this week. It's been a while since I've had Big Show on the show. It's also been a while since a lot of Florida guys caught him in Florida. So I was like, man, I want to get some Florida guys who were dragging plastics, who were fishing reeds, who were doing typical stuff like that, and it just kind of flows. And then in the off season, I try to give listeners an inside view of the industry on how it works, whether it's from the boating industry using BTL sponsors, the batteries. There's so much that makes it work. It's such a big multi-million, billion-dollar industry, but it's also really small too. So I think the more people can understand how all of the parts kind of work together, it might not be like the sexiest shows, but those are the ones that I enjoy the most when you see like kind of the inner workings behind the scenes with the guys who work with companies, who work with pro staffs, who work to develop baits, things like that. So I try to do like a mixture of the on the water and the stuff that goes on kind of behind the scenes off the water that makes the 160 guys that do this full time on the BPT and the Elite Series run smoothly.
Well, when I went on Bass Zone, when I went on the Bass Zone website this morning, you already had all your shows lined up for this week. Is that something you did this morning, or is that something you did yesterday, or at the end of last week? You know, how did that work out?
So,
because they're all very relevant. I mean, it's not like, I mean, who knew that Terry Scroggins was going to do what he was going to do? Who knew what Bobby Lane was going to do? You know, and yet here they are all lined up. How does that get done?
So I keep so like during the open week, I mean, I knew I've got it. There's an invitational coming up. There's a BPT going on. You had the open this week. I've got a big calendar up on my wall that I kind of have out. So I know, so I'm keeping track of that as the open week goes on. And then, you know, on my drive home, I'm kind of thinking who would be good guests? Who can I get on? I'm looking to see who's fishing the invitational that wouldn't be able to get guests. How can I get that on? Is there an off day that I could have someone who's fishing both of it? And it all just kind of flows. I really, instead of really planning it out, I talk with guys that I want to talk to that I think are interesting, and that's the way I've kind of rolled with it for the last 3 years. Like if I think it's an interesting show, like I would love to know how Big Show caught him. I've got Bobby Lane on Thursday. That's an interesting story. I mean, he went Elite Series, BPT, missed the Elite Series by 1 point, got an exemption, went back to the BPT, then won a BPT in front of his family and $150. Like, how do you pass that show up too? So every week it just kind of flows organically. And like I said, it's a really easy industry to work with because these guys go out of their way to make time to jump on. And with the technology that we have, all they have to have is a decent cell signal and a smartphone, and you can get a one-on-one interview with them.
So, okay. But you're also the sales department there, right?
Correct.
Okay. This is the thing that I always found to be a struggle, trying to produce the content and trying to reach out and come up with advertisers. I notice you don't wrap your boat and you don't wear a big tournament shirt, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Are the two separate, or is it, what's the rationale behind all of that?
So when I started fishing Toyotas and Opens in around the 2018, 2019 timeframe, I separated my on the water, like Matt Pangrac fishing, from 71 Media, which is what I worked with independently with Jeffrey. So there was really kind of a separation between BTL, and there was some crossover there, but it was different between like the on the water. As I've kind of taken it over through the past 3 years, it makes a lot more sense. Like everything that is sponsored on BTL, I also use in the opens.
Yeah.
And like one thing has become really apparent, and there's some guys who are really good at doing this early. The Gerald Swindles, the Mike Iaconellis, the Skeet Reeses, is they have multiple revenue streams. Rojas is also good at this. Like they're not dependent on their on the water performance. Their on the water performance enhances everything that they do off of the water, whether it's bait development, like the Ike Live, other shows, lure development, something. So I it's I use sponsors that I learn their product, and I often learn their product. Like when we went with Pro Guide batteries, like I knew nothing about battery. Like I am not good when it comes to electronics and stuff. So I had them on the show 3 or 4 times. I just asked dumb questions about batteries till I could explain it. Because I get messages to be like, "Hey, what's your battery setup?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I plug it in, I see the green lights, and I go." But after 3 or 4 shows, I can say, "Well, I'm running 2 12s in parallel, 236, start or blah, the whole 9 yards. And this is why it works and how it works." I've done the same thing with all the sponsors. I bring them in to the show, and then I use that on the water to showcase it. I'm in the process of working on a wrap for this year, trying to do a unique wrap. I'm like, Keith, I'm obsessed with crappie fishing. I know, like you're in California, right?
Yeah, but I had a really good day of crappie fishing in Maryland over winter break, and
Yeah,
it was. I'm right with you.
I don't hunt. I've really gotten into the crappie fishing. I've got sponsors like Beatdown and Power Breaks
Yeah, power
and the
breaks.
Bass Tank and all that, and they like kind of mix with the crappie world. Uh, so I'm working on some stuff for later in the year on that. But I align with the sponsors, with the products that I use, develop a personal relationship with those people, and then use them in the show. So it's not just a straight out advertisement, but it's an understanding of that product. So that's kind of how it works is I develop a relationship with them because I use all that stuff on the water, on the Bass Cat, everything it is. So it just seems kind of natural when it comes to it. And then they get the on the water and the show. As far as the jersey, no one's ever said I have. Like no one's ever been like, "Hey, like you need a jersey." If someone said you need a jersey, I would get a jersey. But until then, I'll put the patch on, I'll wear the AFCO stuff, and I'm good to go.
Well, I tell you what, one of the things that's critical, and I look for this more than anything in what I watch, is the integrity of the person that delivers the message. And I whatever you do, you pull it off very well. And I can see how and why it works. It's just because you're such a believable character. And anyway, I'm not trying to make it
Well,
too
thank
much
you. I
sunshine
appreciate
here,
that.
but it's you're on today because I'm a big fan. So it's like you
Thank you.
said a few minutes ago, you interview people that you want to talk to. So here we go. Our guest today is Matt Pangrac, host of Bass Talk Live, also known as BTL. Um, Virtually every time you have somebody on, you ask this question, and I've always wanted to ask you this question. What is the state of professional bass fishing at this moment?
It's an interesting question. I think right now it's changing. I think you have a lot of professional anglers that are realizing kind of what I talked about earlier, that in order to be safe, in order to be able to support your family, to know that you're going to have income coming in the rapidly changing world, you have to remain relevant outside of the 8 to 15 weeks that you're competing in a tournament. So I think you have a lot of younger anglers that are coming in that are understanding that from the social media side. You have a lot of established anglers that are trying to add to it. You look at like an Edwin Evers, what he's done
Yeah.
with his YouTube channel. I just roomed this past week in the Open with Matt Steffen and Miles Berghoff. Steffen's on something like 700 something days in a row that he's put a video out on YouTube. Miles puts a video out every single day. Uh, I think that there is a shift right now from the tournament wins are still very important. You can talk to, and like I said, I work with my sponsor. You can, I'll call Omni and say like, "Do you know?" And they're like, "Yeah, we notice a big difference. Like when a bait is used as a winner, as a winning bait, we see an uptick on that." But right now, the state of the industry, I think, is less important on actual tournaments and tournament finishes than it is on overall consistent relevance in the industry, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. Um, we used to base relevance on wins and losses,
Mm-hmm.
but it's always come down. There's that word again. It's always come down to impressions, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're standing up on the stage. It's great if you are, but if you're able to produce something that people want to access and want to watch, um, it's that's what it is. And I what I like about the current state is I feel like a professional angler has to be a professional angler, not just someone who shows up for tournaments every day, but you've got to be doing something that draws people's attention.
It seems like the line over the last 5 years has really been blurred between professional anglers who create content and content creators who fish tournaments. Uh, I don't consider myself a professional angler. I don't consider myself a content creator. I consider myself someone who makes a living in the industry. Like I take the tournament side of it very seriously. I take the podcast and that creation side of it very seriously as well. But I think the most successful people in the industry now understand who fish as well understand that they have to have that mix.
So bottom line, are we better off now than we were in Randy Blockett's golden age, or or
I
are
don't.
we
So
or are
listen, I
we
had this talk. So we're at the meeting. We're at the pavilion, Humphrey Pavilion. We're all walking up. I park next to Rick Pierce. Rick Pierce, he's on
Mhm.
the list of the final 21 guys for the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame to get voted on to get inducted in
Well
this
deserved?
September. Well deserved. And Rick came up and he said, let me bend your ear for a second, Panger. And I said, all right, hit me with it. He said, look around. And I said, okay. And he goes, what do you notice? And I said, well, I said, everyone else walking up to this meeting is 20, 21, 22, 23. All the boats in the parking lot are colleges and things like that. And he said, exactly. He said there's a lot of controversy, and I'm paraphrasing it. This is exactly what he said. But basically his point was there's more young blood in tournament bass fishing right now than there ever has been. And you can look at like that from a number of perspectives. You can look at it as look at all the information that's out there that hadn't been. You can look at it, you can actually see guys try, like you can watch Jacob Wheeler dang near every single cast that he makes now on the BPT. So you can learn from that. You can take the technology into it. You can look at the organizations that started with FLW and MLF or Bassmaster, Wade Middleton's Collegiate Bass. I mean, you have all these guys that are now started when they're 10, 11 years old and juniors and have worked their way up. They're used to multiple day tournaments. They're used to traveling. And when you look at it from that standpoint, you're like, dude, it's in a pretty good spot. Like, look at all these young kids that are carrying the torch for the sport, and there's never been this influx of young blood before. So I look at it from that, from that aspect that Rick pointed out, and I'm like, man, it's in a pretty good spot right now. There's more young anglers than there ever has been that are competing at a higher level. Like, how can that be bad? Like, that's a whole nother generation that are going to be buying boats, buying electronics, buying baits, rods, reels, the whole 9 yards for the next 30 years.
Well, I know that Camus Boats has recognized this, and Camus Boats has a program for high school anglers, and they have a program for college anglers. And my question is, who's buying these boats? But
Yeah.
they have a program, and it's pretty lucrative. And anyway, so yeah, to your point, it's absolutely catching people's attention. And I think Rick Pierce is spot on if he noticed that's who's walking around at these tournaments because that is the world that we live in. We're talking to Matt Pangrac. He is the host of BTL. I'm going to proclaim you Commissioner of Bass Fishing. Uh, if you're not familiar with my show, we do this from time to time. We do a commissioner show where we do this kind of stuff. But anyway, I want to proclaim you Commissioner of Bass
Okay.
Fishing. Make whatever sweeping changes that need to be made, and let's hear what you got.
So, regardless of what organization it is, there needs to be two words that every decision when it comes to tournament fishing is based on. And those two words are fair and equal. And regardless of what organization you fish for, over the last specifically 2 or 3 years, it seems like there's been a lot of decisions that have been made to placate one section of the anglers or to solve one problem without looking at the effects of that decision. And if you take a step back and you say fair and equal, and that's for everybody that is paying an entry fee into that tournament, that's all we ask for. I think if you took the Toyota Series, the Bassmaster Opens, the Invitationals, the BPT, and the Elite Series, there's not a single person that would say, I do not want to compete under a fair and equal playing field. If I was a commissioner, I would look at every rule that I have in it. I would look at every decision that is made, and I would base or change those decisions on, is this fair and equal for the entire field? That's what I would do.
How simple? How simple?
Mm-hmm.
What I mean, yeah, it makes too much sense. It makes too much sense, and it's pretty clear that I'm not really sure how decisions are being made in some of the organizations. Well, because they've all done something controversial recently, and they all seems to be a yearly occurrence, and fair and equal. You know, you have
And it's
angler.
difficult because you've got, both of the major organizations are for profit businesses.
Yeah.
And that's something, as I've gotten older and gotten into this, I've I've been on the short end of that, and I've been on the receiving end of that. But it is a business that is for profit. We are customers of the organization, regardless of which organization or both organizations that you fish for. So they're going to make decisions where they say, we know that you guys don't like this, but this is a business decision that we have to make on our end. And then as anglers, it is our decision to determine where we want to take that business.
Yep. That is correct. That is correct. While we're on the subject of Bass Commissioner, each of the national tours is going to proclaim that their Angler of the Year this coming year is the world champion.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, as a commissioner, how in the world, or can we ever come up with a system that unifies and produces a single Angler of the Year?
I mean, the closest we've come to it would be the TTBCs, where they took, back in the day, the top 15 on the FLW, the top 15 from BASS, and the top 15 from the PAA. They put them together in the Toyota Texas Bass Classic, and you had a winner that was like that. But I think it's great debate. I mean, you've got a podcast, I've got a podcast. There's tons of shows out there. I think that one of the beautiful things about fishing, where there's different rules from different organizations, is on any day you can have an angler who beats another angler. Like if you take individual sports, like, dude, I could go out and beat Jacob Wheeler tomorrow in an 8-hour tournament. Like it's unlikely, but I could do it. If I went on the golf course, I'm never beating Scotty Scheffler. If I went on the tennis, I'm never beating any other individual sport. But in fishing, I think that it's really hard to determine who is number one because there's so many uncontrollable variables in the game. I think that's what makes it difficult to proclaim the top, but that's also what makes it like so beautiful and so mind blowing. And that's why so many of us are so obsessed with it too, because we can get better and we can have those perfect days in fishing when you literally know, like, there's no one else that can beat me on the lake.
Well, on our website, I tried this a couple of years where I just kept track of every tournament possible, and had this unbelievable database of everybody's performance. And I think in 2023, Dakota Iber was our Angler of the Year because he just did everybody. And then oh gosh, I should remember who our 2024. Anyway, I'm not doing it this year because it just is too much work.
Yeah,
It's just too much work. But there'd be great if there'd be a way to combine all the.
They used to have a website. I know it went under, but it literally, like, from any like they did BFLs, they did ABAs, they did everything. They weighted it based on where you finished, based on how many people were in the field, based on how much weight you had. They had it for each state. I'm trying to remember what the name of the website was, but you could like literally go in and type in all these things, and it would give you a list of every single angler. And it was really cool. I just don't think it generated enough revenue to make it viable.
Well, as someone who tried to make that happen, I can tell you it did not generate enough. That wasn't my site, but my site did a similar thing, and it was just a matter of something that I really enjoyed following. But it just at some point, it's too mind-boggling.
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe someday we could find a sponsor and invite the top X number of anglers from each tour to compete in a series of events or something like that. But I just there's part of me that just wants to know who the top angler of the year is.
Mm-hmm. And now with the difference in the technology, it'd be really hard too. So like then when you get that together, like with the elites, do you allow them all to have one transducer? Do you do it half the time? Do you do it one period? Do you not do it? Like there's so many different variables in it now. I mean, I think it would be really hard to. I mean, in my opinion, right now, just as like take a media guy's hat. Like I think there's not much discussion right now. Like Jacob Wheeler is number one.
Yeah, I can agree with that, and I think most people can. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean for a decade plus, it was KVD. You know, would that be consensus with Wheeler? I think the majority of the guys would say, I mean, he's number one.
Yeah. Yeah, but in terms of angler of the year,
Yeah.
who had the best year? Anyway, that's one of those things.
Yeah.
BTL's Matt Pangrac is with us today. This is the "Oh God, It's a Forward-Facing Sonar" portion of the show segment. But each of the major tours this year reacted to the drama of forward-facing sonar with various changes. I'd like to hear your thoughts about each of them. We can start with any of the ones you want. BPT, if you'd like. I really was interested in your interview with the young guy
Drew Gill.
who talked about it's just going to make it even worse for the guys that don't.
Drew Gill.
What's that?
Drew Gill.
Oh yeah, Drew. Yeah, I was really interested in Drew's interview. I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Be careful what you wish for. But yeah, let's hear what you think about each of the tours.
I think it's really interesting, and what I think is interesting is this is, this has been around since 2017, and it really just came to a head last year, and both FLW originally and then MLF and Bass had 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023 to do something about it. And they didn't. And it wasn't until really, I would say 2023 that it became a major issue. I think it's interesting how each of the organizations has approached it, with the MPFO with none, with a real hybrid theory over on the BPT, and then with allowing one transducer on Bass. My personal view on it is you had 8 years to do something about it, and you didn't, and you cultivated a generation of anglers that are now using it, integrating it into their daily routine. These guys have been using it since they were 14, 15, 16 years old. Every angler has had the exact same opportunity to learn the intricacies of it, to fish it, to build it into their style of fishing, whether that's a power, whether that's finesse, whether that's shallow, perspective, offshore, stumps. And it doesn't seem fair to me to take it away after you have anglers that have made the top level utilizing it. To me, it would be like taking the 3-point line away from Steph Curry.
Thank you. This, to me, this wasn't a problem until Randy Blockett's YouTube channel came along. I just don't think it was. Well, I think what it comes down to is that there's a lot of old guys that don't like getting beat by young guys. And I would say you mentioned Jacob Wheeler earlier. Jacob Wheeler is a great example. He is not a young guy. He was a young guy, but he is not a young
Tour
guy.
veteran.
He is a veteran, and he has embraced this. And it's, to me, when you make this argument, you're admitting that you can't compete. You're just flat out admitting that you can't compete. Why? Which is why when I look at what the NPFL did, I'm like, guys, really? Why don't we just call it the senior tour?
So I understand, like, if there is a market for that, if there are enough anglers that want to do that, I have no issue with that. Where I where I and I'll say this, and I like Brad. I like the MPFL. I support them. I say they're like a cat. They have 9 lives over there. They have every reason to not exist right now, and they keep coming back because they make good decisions, because they take care of their anglers, because there's a core base of guys that really enjoy fishing that. But to me, it makes no sense in some of the things that they've come out with in press releases and statements out there to talk about the reliance on technology and allow 360 but not allow the forward facing sonar. If you want to go old school, but like, where do you draw, like, where is that arbitrary line? Where is it objective and where is it subjective? So where is it to say, if you look back at, and I'll go back to the Toyota Texas Bass Classic and go back to a number of years there, like, Keith Combs was very dominant. One of the reasons that he was because he was a very early adopter of the 360, and he'd take that chartreuse powder blue back and he'd take that big worm and he'd put it in brush piles that other guys weren't looking at, and he'd sit in that shallow water. He'd say, oh, there's piles over there. I mean, the guy won $750,000 because of technology, and also because Keith Combs, one of the best crankers in the world, but he utilized that. So, like, to say 360 is okay, but the live stuff isn't, like, I think if you're gonna do that, you go all or nothing. So, like, where do you draw the line on that is what I'm saying. I like the fact that there are 3 different organizations that are doing 3 different things. I think we're gonna have to wait and see how it all pans out, but I hope, Keith, I hope that this isn't a case of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Because if you look at the organizations, there's been some one-off, like, no forward-facing stuff. They did not have good participation numbers. You look at what happened with the invitationals, where they did one day with, one day without. There are a lot of guys that would be fishing the invitational here in a couple weeks that fish the open on Rayburn. There are guys who made the BPT because they didn't want to go back to the one day with, one day without. I think if you were to pull the majority of high level tournament anglers across all the board, I'm not just talking about the top guys, I'm not talking about the guys who have made millions of dollars without it. They don't want to go back to fishing without it, because those organizations made that decision for those 7 years that they didn't do anything about it, that it is now part of their fishing arsenal, is now part of their repertoire, and the Pandora's box is opened. And to
Yeah.
go back without it, I think, would be an injustice to an entire generation of anglers, which is one of the reasons why there's so much new young blood in the sport right now.
Yeah, this is what we always talk about. How are we going to get new anglers to come into the sport? Well, I think the technology is something that youth is familiar with, and bring them in. You know, I I've been a key donator in each of the last couple of U.S. Opens out here in the West, and I've gotten my lunch fed to me by guys that are good at this. So I'm going to get better at this. I don't know that
Mm-hmm.
I will ever win the U.S. Open, but I'm going to get better at this. I'm determined to get better at it. We mentioned crappie fishing. I had this crappie trip in Maryland recently, and it was phenomenal. It was incredible just to see how fish reacted to the baits and things like that. So I don't know. I think that technology increases are good for the sport, and I think they should let you have your power breaks too. By the way.
Yeah, yeah, I think that was a squeaky wheel gets the most grease situation, where you had a couple guys that were very vocal about it, that had sponsorship with trolling motor companies that did not want, that would not allow them contractually to put them on.
Yeah.
So they made a big, but, like, at the same time, Keith, like, I just, like I said, just competed on Sam Rayburn, and I had 6 spinning rods in the boat and 1 jerkbait on 10-pound test. And there's still a part of me that was saying, man, we're pre-spawn on Sam Rayburn with so much history, so much tradition. And I made 5 casts with a jerkbait, 1 cast with a drop shot. And for 3 days of practice and 1 tournament day, every other cast was made with a jig head minnow. And I would say 60 to 70% of the field could say the same thing. So I do. There is, and maybe this is because I'm old. I'm older now, right? I've been in it forever. Like, I mean, this is I didn't grow up with that. Like, I did it. Like, I fished Rayburn, where it's, you know, make sure you got your red traps, and even though you hate throwing a Carolina rig, you want to be dragging that thing, trying to find the hard spot on it, and the chatterbait. But part of me was like, man, I I don't know. I don't. There was a part of me that's like, is this good for the sport that you're on a fishery like this? And there is one thing that you know, and then you look at the top 10, every single, or 9 of the top 10 had the exact same, I mean, like the exact same baits, like minor jig head changes, but you know, like 7 of them had a mooch minnow on. And then the guys that didn't have a bait on, you know, that was a Sakamata shad. And I'm like, is that good? I don't know. Like, I said that in the last segment, but I still, I I understand some of the issues that can arise with mass standardization because it is so effective. I don't know what the right answer to that is. I really don't. I would be very interesting to see how things play out over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, but I agree, and I don't want to keep beating a dead horse in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize that just about every time I do a podcast, there's got to be a
Yeah.
forward facing sonar segment. But as you said, for so many years, nobody said a word about this, and now all of a sudden it's a problem. It's a problem because people that don't adapt um, don't like getting beat by people that have adapted it. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. Uh, and yeah, I mean, it's a powerful tool, but so is side imaging. Dude, I remember being out on Toledo Bend with Harold Allen. We were covering an Elite Series tournament, and Harold was dog cussing 1 foot contours and navionics chips and GPS mapping. And we went above the bridge, and there were a couple guys that were out in the forest, and he's like, the only reason those guys are out there is because they could look at their map and they could see that there's a high spot. And then they just have to hit a button and they can go directly back to that high spot. And he goes, you see that tree and you see that roof and you see that. He goes, I fished that spot since 1970 and I never saw anyone on it because I knew how to triangulate and I knew how to drive a boat. He goes, these guys don't know how to triangulate. They don't know how to drive a boat. They look at their map, they drop a waypoint, and they can go right back to it. That's 8 systems removed from where we are now. Like, where do you stop? And I mean, he had a valid point there, right? Like, I mean, that's how I also did an interview with a guy named Rooster on Lake Gunnersville, who used to be like right when after they filled Lake Gunnersville, he found all the shell beds by dragging a window weight on a rope. And he could tell based on the feeling of the rope whether it was a hard bottom or not. He was one of the original guys who fished offshore there. Like how do you stymie growth without everybody ending up doing the same? I don't know. It's the same thing you're dealing with social media. It's the same thing you're dealing with in the world right now. It's an interesting question, Keith. It really is.
And I recognize it's probably one that doesn't have an answer.
Doesn't have an answer.
Absolutely. Hey, man, I appreciate you being with us today. I've really been looking forward to the opportunity to kind of pull back the cover a little bit and see what's behind the curtain of Bass Talk Live. And I know the folks are going to really enjoy this. So thank you for being with us, and take care. Talk to you again soon.
When are you going to bring the brush pile back?
I don't know. You know what's funny about the brush pile is back in the day, and this is important historically, because right around 2005 is when this industry was going through some real serious stuff. And you know, guys wanted to use their own boats in tournaments so that they could get, you know, so that they could sell their sponsor stuff and things like that. And I guess I was kind of a mouthpiece for a lot of people that couldn't speak out. And I would get a lot of not anonymous. They would just say, it's, you know, don't use my name. And that's where a lot of that brush pile stuff came from, is that guys just feed me information about what was going on. And that's right about the time that the angler, the Professional Angler Association,
the
developed.
PA.
And those were some good times.
It's interesting. I don't think that there are. Okay, there might be more issues. I don't feel like there's an abnormally amount more large issues in professional bass fishing now. There's just more outlets to report it, to
Yeah,
talk about it, to with the social media. You've been in this game a long time. A lot of the things that we're talking about now publicly have been talked about behind the scenes since I started doing this in 2007.
sure, sure. It's like I said, social media is it's the great amplifier.
Yeah.
It amplifies everything. And I make I make a lot of jokes about Randy and his opinions, but I think Randy Blockett does is super good for the love him or hate him. What he does is great for it. And what Luke Duncan does is love him or hate him is great. It's just it's good. I mean, it's tough to consume. So
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I
yeah,
appreciate it. I enjoyed
yep.
it.
All right. You take care. We'll talk
I
to
was
you again.
hoping you would play your guitar or something. I was hoping that's how the show ended. Like you just like pick it up
Well,
and
you see,
start
that's
shredding.
if you do decide to listen to this, and when it finally gets edited in, all the guitar music will be my playing,
Yeah.
simply because anytime I used music in the past, YouTube would send me threatening, whatever
Yeah.
they would send. So I finally decided I'm just going to record my own garbage and put that in as background music. So there you
I
go.
appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Keith.
All right. Take care. You might know that I'm the Western representative for Camus Boats, and in that capacity, I have a boat that I use to promote our brand. I drag the CX21 Pro to boat shows, tournaments, and various other events where bass anglers tend to congregate throughout the West. The boat has been in the water. It's got about 18 hours on the Mercury Pro XS 250 outboard. It has walk-up steps on the trailer, deck lights, interior lighting on all the boxes and lockers, slam latches, and SeaDeck on the cockpit floor. Humminbird 12-inch Helix units on the bow and at the console with Mega Live installed. The trolling motor is a 52-inch Minn Kota Ultrex, and the boat is completely ready for tournament competition or just going out for a day of fun fishing. The Camus difference is that it is an Earl Bentz boat. It features a hand-laid hull as opposed to a hand-sprayed hull that's used by many of our competitors. Additionally, the tri-core composite transom is the strongest in the industry. What's the difference between hand-laid and hand-sprayed? Well, hand spraying is faster. It may be a little more efficient in terms of saving money, but it results in uneven layering of fiberglass, which is why the hulls on their boats crack and our hand-laid hulls do not. The boat flat out catches fish. At 21 feet 4 inches, this boat flies while keeping its precious cargo, you, safe and dry in rough water. This is a fully loaded promotional boat. It's used at boat shows and special events. This means that the boat is available at a special promotional price. If you're interested, send me a DM on Instagram at BassTourAnglersPodcast. If you're looking for more information about Camus Boats, check out CamusBoats.com, our full service, full experience website. You'll find full spec sheets, e-catalogs, and an application that allows you to design your own boat. It's really some very low-hanging fruit for me to complain about the BAS Open at Sam Rayburn this past week. For those of you that don't know, the Sam Rayburn event was reduced to a single day due to cancellations on day 1 and day 3. However, it's still a shame. With the amount of money, travel, and what's at stake, it just seems that a BASS Open event needs to be a multi-day affair. Absolutely, we do not want to put anglers in situations where they're going to be endangered. In fact, hats off to BASS for not sending out boats in those conditions. It wasn't too long ago that we went out and fished. I mean, short of a tornado, we went out and fished. It was dangerous. And again, hats off to BASS for not putting those anglers in those kinds of situations. But The idea that we only allow those 3 days as competition days is where I see the mistake being made. Why not have a window of 5 days to get those 3 days in? I know why. Anglers trying to qualify for the Elite Series are already pressed about as hard as they can be pressed. I mean, they are squeezed as much as they can be squeezed. A large portion of the field in those events is already trying to get every single second of time that they can be away from work into the current format. An extra 2-day commitment would eliminate quite a few. I get that. Still, we just had a qualifier for the BASS Elite Series reduced to a turkey shoot, and that's just not right. Maybe the answer is to not schedule events during certain treacherous weather months on lakes where bad weather is likely. Maybe the answer is just to start in Florida every season or California. I'm Keith Neiswanger. This is the Bass Tour Anglers Podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you'd like to reach us, please send us a direct message on Instagram at BassTourAnglersPodcast. Take care. Be safe. We'll talk to you next time.